Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, in a small farming community named Shaoshan, located in the province of Hunan, China. He was born into a peasant family that had lived there for generations. While life was tough for many in China, Mao's father was a successful grain dealer, and his mother was described as a nurturing parent. Mao attended a small school in his village, but overall he did not receive much formal education when he was a young boy. By the age of 13, he was working full-time in the fields. At the age of 14, his father had arranged a marriage for him, but he refused. When he turned 17, he left his village and attended secondary school in the city of Changsha, the capital of Hunan. 1 year in, a revolution occurred. At the time, the Qing dynasty had ruled. This dynasty was weak and inept. It failed to industrialize China, and it also was unable to confront foreign aggressors. There were many in China that wished to see their country rise on the global stage, and these people formed the Nationalist Party. It was led by a man named Sun Yat-sen, who to this day is known as the Father of China. In 1912, the Qing dynasty was finally overthrown, and the Republic of China was established. Fast forward 5 years later, and communism is on the rise. In 1917, Vladimir Lenin and his cohorts had successfully led a communist revolution in Russia. They removed the royal family from power and established the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, in China, Mao Zedong had completed his education in Hunan in 1918. He would have returned home, but his mother passed away. He instead decided to move to the capital of China, Beijing. He found a job in Beijing University and even attended a few classes. It was during this time he had heard of the Communist Revolution in Russia. In 1921, Mao Zedong became one of the first members of the Chinese Communist Party. Even though China's Communist Party grew in strength, the Nationalist Party remained in power. At first, these two groups got along. In 1923, the Nationalist Party leader, Sun Yat-sen, decided that it was best to cooperate with the Communists. Mao Zedong at first supported both parties, but as time grew, he became more enamored with Leninism. Vladimir Lenin, who had led the Communist Revolution in Russia, believed that appealing and energizing the poor farming class was the key to establishing communism. Over the next few years, Mao rose through the ranks of the Communist Party. In March 1925, Sun Yat-sen died. This event set off the fireworks. His successor, Chiang Kai-shek, became the leader of the Nationalist Party. This guy was far more conservative, and in April 1927, he began a violent purge of the communists, imprisoning some and killing others. In September of that same year, Mao led an army of peasants against the Nationalist Party, but he was defeated. The remnants of the Communist Army retreated to the mountains in the Jiangxi province. It was there that Mao established the Soviet Republic of China, of which he was the chairman. His army of guerrilla fighters was small but strong. Any dissidents within the party who defied the party would be tortured and executed. Fast forward 7 years later, and Mao's territory had grown. 10 regions in the Jiangxi province were under his control. Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the ruling Nationalist Party, grew nervous. His small raids and attacks on the communists were not having the effect that he wanted. He decided it was time to end the problem once and for all, with one swift blow. In October of 1934, Chiang Kai-shek gathered 1 million government forces and surrounded the communist-occupied areas. Mao and other leaders were alerted, and Mao made the decision to retreat. This retreat became known as the Long March. Over the course of 12 long months, the communists traveled to Yan'an in northern China. It's estimated that only 30,000 of the original 100,000 survived the 8,000-mile journey. However, this monstrous blow to the communists did not have the long-lasting effect that Chiang Kai-shek wanted. Once word got out that the communists escaped, many young people migrated to the Yan'an province to join them. On top of that, Mao Zedong used his compelling oratory abilities to recruit many more. Fast forward 3 years later, and a new player enters the game, the Japanese. In July 1937, the Japanese Imperial Army invaded China, one of several events that kick-started World War II. The Nationalist Party, still led by Chiang Kai-shek, suffered numerous defeats on the eastern coast of China. Chiang Kai-shek realized that he could not fight a war on both fronts. He decided to make an alliance with the communists. Mao and Chiang, the communists and the nationalists, fought together while receiving aid from the Allied forces. Eventually, the Japanese were defeated in 1945, with a little help from the United States. After the war ended, the communists and nationalists picked up right where they left off. This bloody civil war is known as the Chinese Communist Revolution, and it lasted from 1945 to 1949. And as you can probably guess, the communists defeated the nationalists. Chiang Kai-shek and the nationalists retreated to modern-day Taiwan. The sovereignty of Taiwan to this day is still a heated political issue. Mao Zedong instituted many land reforms through persuasion and coercion. He took land from warlords and turned it into communes. He promoted the status of women. He doubled the school population, which increased the country's literacy, and he increased access to healthcare, which increased life expectancy. So far, it may seem that it wasn't so bad, but soon a series of unfortunate events and decisions took place. Mao's reforms were not as popular and successful in big cities. In 1956, Mao started the 100 Flowers campaign. He fully allowed people to provide constructive criticism so he could hear new ideas and improve the way he ran things. Instead, many urban intellectuals harshly criticized Mao. Mao was shook. He became paranoid and he believed he could lose control, so he launched the anti-rightist campaign. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese dissidents were accused of being rightists and were locked up. In 1958, Mao Zedong initiated an economic plan known as the Great Leap Forward. The goal of this program was to massively increase agricultural and industrial output. Massive agricultural communes were formed, and in some cases tens of thousands of people assigned to work the fields. Each family was given a small portion of land and a share of the profits. At first this program seemed to work, but this was actually all a lie. The truth eventually came out that people on every level were lying about their harvest yields in order to avoid humiliation and punishment. On top of this, there were 3 years of floods and droughts. There was also the backyard steel program, which called for farmers to leave their farms and enter factories to smelt steel, a job in which they had no experience. Many wasteful projects were pursued as well. For example, dams were built in the wrong locations, and in some cases dams were built so poorly that they would eventually burst. All of this stuff led to massive famines all over China, and in the end, around 40 million people starved to death between 1959 to 1961. I should note that this number varies a lot, but almost all sources agree that the number of Chinese people that starved during this time is in the tens of millions. Following the massive failure that was the Great Leap Forward, Mao Zedong took a step back from power. He maintained his position, but some of his responsibilities were shifted to others within the party. 6 years later, he returned. He claimed that many bourgeoisie capitalist elements had sprouted like weeds within China, and the communist system was under threat. He rallied many young people, and they became Red Guards. These Red Guards caused chaos, and millions were killed, and many educated intellectuals within the cities were sent to prison labor camps to be re-educated. In the midst of the Cold War, U.S. President Richard Nixon wished to pursue a policy of peace with the Eastern Bloc. This policy became known as détente. In 1972, Richard Nixon met with Mao Zedong. During this meeting, there actually wasn't much accomplished, since Mao Zedong was suffering from Parkinson's disease. 4 years later, on September 9, 1976, Mao passed away. After his death, his successor, Deng Xiaoping, implemented many free market reforms. China to this day is still considered an authoritarian communist country, but really it now actually does have many capitalist features. Now let's discuss his legacy. In the West, he's often viewed as a tyrannical and inept dictator who allowed tens of millions of his own countrymen to die through evil and stupid policies. In China, it is acknowledged that the Great Leap Forward failed, but the perception of him is nowhere near as bad. Although they acknowledge his failures and weaknesses, he is officially viewed as a powerful revolutionary. In fact, his body was embalmed, and there's a mausoleum where you can visit and see his body. Well, that's all for this video. If you liked it and can afford to do so, please consider donating to my Patreon or PayPal so I can make more of them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.